So, so I want to talk about psychopathy. Uh, Psychopathy, like being a psychopath, is I mean it's something that's like a heavily known and thrown around thing in a colloquial sense, and like weirdly enough, the like actual technical like medically applied use is like pretty much colloquial, because it's like not a specific definite sort of thing exactly. It's sort of like a general like set of traits that's like fuzzily recognized, like in a technical sense. That's how it works. But basically, what it like the etymology is actually like good. Psychopathy is basically like being psychotically unempathic, because empathic means like you feel what the other person feels. It means that you relate to the emotional living experience of someone other than yourself. Psychosis is just like rejecting or refusing or being disconnected from just reality. So psychopathy is like being disconnected from the experience of others, such that you have an especially like a strange level of like lack of interest in the well-being of others generally, is how it's sort of understood in significance. And then colloquially, it's sort of associated with like violent tendencies, but that's essentially just where it's most easily recognized. But because you have to fucking be, yeah, it has to be something like that going on to be capable of whatever is how the common thought goes, which isn't strictly right. But anyway, but yeah, I want to talk about psychopathy as something that's actually like just deviously common. It's actually like epidemically fucking common in our society, actually. It has to be treated as not as like anything like a kind of personality analysis. It's not like, it shouldn't be understood at the individual level. I want to talk about how psychopathy is a product of institutional abstraction. So what I mean by that, so abstraction, like I've said before, it just means sort of being disconnected from a groundedness, not being based in like immanent reality in some form. So institutional abstraction basically just means like institutions, like sets of like social networks of bureaucracies, or like forms of procedure, whatever the fuck, which are in place such that acting according to the institution and as a product of or as a form of the institution means that there is no necessity for the actor to ground themselves in a part of reality that they are a part of, that they are connected to in terms of actions. Like if they act wholly according to the institution, then like formally they have been abstracted from that part of reality, which is like nonetheless there, but it's like, it's not their job, whatever. So institutional abstraction is the way that like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, I guess. Oh, I'm not even sure about that, but I don't know. Most people would say it's not necessarily a bad thing if you think about the concept. Like, what's an example? I mean, the sort of like the way a lawyer is supposed to be able to defend someone, whether or not they're guilty. It's like their guilt is abstracted from the purpose of lawyering, because the lawyer is just to fulfill the civic duty of the right of a given person to have the best defense possible. So they're abstracted from like the fact of the matter of the guilt, which one could argue then, like, should they be defended so rigorously? If like they did it, like a lawyer can know that, and it can be their job to like they cannot fucking betray their client or tell anyone or anything. That's sort of a well-known kind of example. What's another example? I mean, so the obvious thing is the profit motive as being the bottom line of business decisions is obviously kind of the main thing. Like that is institutional abstraction. So when I don't know, like an insurance company, for instance, when an insurance company like denies coverage to someone who's like, I'm gonna fucking die if I don't get this operation, I don't have the money for it, you need to help me, and they're like, oh yeah, but your dad didn't fill line 38 and form 62F, so get fucked. That is like institutional abstraction. because the point is, that's not like the automatic, intuitive, like human response to a given scenario. That's a kind of response that is like, it is automatic. It's not like a horrible, guilty act of the particular employee, because they are acting in an automatic manner as a representative, and they have their own self-interest that is, I mean, they're under duress. But it's like, it's an alternative intuition that's in place on account of like the normalization of the institution as necessary. Like the institution itself is regarded as necessary, and then therefore acting according with the institution over-determines individual will. And so psychopathy as institutional abstraction. This just means like the way it becomes normal to justify just inhumane, just like radically, psychotically unempathic acts and decisions on the basis of institutional norms. And this is like wholly accepted by society. Like to be clear, this is like the manner in which the great majority of like Nazi war crimes were done, basically, because like most Nazis weren't fucking, like theorists of hatred, like they weren't doing their own justification. They were like being good soldiers, and like that's not fucking clear your average Nazi exactly, because your good German soldier in World War II is like maybe fucking rounding people up and burning them down in a warehouse. But like the point is how they understood that to be like okay or even good is according to their identity as being compelled by a grander necessity than themselves, which is like this institutional necessity. And I think this is like a better way of conceiving of something that a lot of people do have a sort of intuitive grasp on. There's kind of like a commonsensical notion in our culture of like basically like the madness of crowds, the idea of like how it's bad to give your individual will over to just others than yourself is this big thing. And then that's how a lot of people sort of decrypt and comprehend some really horrible shit. But that's not good enough. Like analytically, it's like not appropriately penetrating. I think this has more explanatory power. because it's not just about this kind of, it's not like the individual just like is good, and like what's bad is just like submitting to something beyond your personal direct sense of the good. Because like people can be shit, and like and like collective structures, like collective wills can be great. It's like about particular incentive structures and how they're designed and what the outcomes can be understood to be. And the best you can sort of generalize that is what's bad is what I'm saying is institutional abstraction, which means designing like a system of incentives, and like a hierarchy of motivations, such that it's like necessary to navigating a certain like social like role, that like to be this, these are your principles. That's like how it works. And I'm not saying that itself is like necessarily bad, because like that's pretty fucking abstract, man. That's like basically just like how any social order is made. But I'm saying that like in the design of a social order, in the like setting forth of an institutional paradigm which defines a given set of, objectively speaking, principles, like procedures which are like hierarchical and are followed to the letter. Like that's what it means to represent the institution. In the design of that, it's possible to like abstract from like at a first pass empathy, but what I mean really is just like, I don't know, something like ethics more on a deeper level, like wisdom, like duty or something. Like it's possible to like take a given institution as like as itself defined with a particular purpose, which is isolated from a holistic frame of reality. So it's like, and this is actually like, in essence, the corporation, like what it means to be incorporated by a state as a business with a particular definite, like singular and isolated self-interest as an institution. Like a business in that sense, like a legal corporation, necessarily has this kind of institutional abstraction. And this is kind of like the essence of the bad motivations at the heart of capitalism, is that it's not that it's wrong to like seek profit, it's that it's necessary to the form of like a legally protected corporation that like, you know, that United Healthcare will let people die for money. Like that's like, it's not just like let's make money, it's that like the institution is designed so that like the actors that will most effectively carry on it as like an alienated will outside of any possible like grounds for empathy will continue and override. So God, I'm really prattling. So I don't know, I don't even have a clear like insight here. It's just like, I just want to put that out there, that institutional abstraction is kind of a good way of putting the way that like good people, like good wills, can be misdirected toward like holistically understood like bad shit. and that this is how we should understand a great deal of psychopathy in society. This is like the way in which culture degenerates. Like this is like, I don't just mean like here now, I mean like this is like the way societies generally degenerate historically. Like this is the fucking like the Roman like senators that were like born into good families and born into political paths of power that have like no life connection to like what built those structures up, and they have no life connection to like the lives of like slaves or the conquered peoples. I mean, this is how, and then this is the exact same thing then today. Like the way that like bigwigs in Washington today, they have no connection like materially, like through them or those they care for directly, like their family and friends. They have no connection to like actually being bombed. like actually being in like a zone that is socially undermined and politically destroyed for the function of like monopolizing access to raw materials. Like this does not register. And the way, if you like take the act, the ultimate meaning, the ultimate like effect on people, and if you take the people that like in a zoned in sense are causing it, like the decision makers that in theory could do this or that, if you take the act and the causal agent in this sort of sillily zoned in sense, and you just describe those in abstract, like this guy did this happened as a result of this, and like why are they doing it, it just sounds very clearly like a psychopath. Very obviously like a psychopath. But what's important to understand is that the manner in which, yes, they are being a psychopath here, it's not a personality diagnosis. It's not a matter of like they're just such shitty particular characters. I mean, they might very well be. That's just like not important. What's happening is that they are acting as agents of a given institutional paradigm. And the institutional paradigm is designed itself in order to have this as outcome. So like if they were to this is what Marx says about capitalists, that like they live under the terror of capital itself as this alien will beyond themselves. If a given capitalist was to decide like, I care about my poor workers, I'm going to pay them beyond what is necessary, they lose. The whole thing goes bust. Someone else comes in and eats that share of the market. And they don't act that way. Or if they do, the same thing happens. And like, that analysis is like kind of one of the most important things he talked about, because it's often enough people sort of describe it as like, oh, well, you know, that was just the industrialization era. That was like the era of the factory. But then Ford came along and figured out we have to pay them decently or something. But like that sort of structure of motivation, the way that played out psychologically, that's a really scary, really important thing to understand, that was not limited to like the factory system. The point is, you have to understand that given agents, given like enactors of particular decision-making capacity that like form like the direction of reality, necessarily do so according to motivated structures that are designed prior to their decisions. And like, it's possible to like make a choice as an individual and like go above and beyond, do better than this, blah. But like, to think in terms of that being what can be done is itself not good enough. Because unless you redesign the system, the structure of incentives, then like it's not going to solve anything for people to like make their better choices. Like everyone has their choice and you can choose to be better. It's like, no, it like literally doesn't work that way, because you'll choose your way to the bottom. And someone out there who might not even be a bad person, who's just like more desperate than you, is going to choose their way up. And the cycle continues. So this is like, I think this is so important. Understanding psychopathy in terms of most cases that one could call that in reality, as being a matter of institutional abstraction. And understanding institutional abstraction is like this major thing that can like result in psychopathy. Like, where am I going? I mean, like, sort of, it's like a twofold thing. Like, it's sort of important to think this way to understand just how evil people can be. Because when you limit your thinking about like decisions that have results to like, in terms of like, would I do this, would I do that, like as a person, like in my character, you fail to imagine like concrete circumstance. Like if you just imagine like, would I fucking like defraud someone, you know, you can say I wouldn't do that, but like, would you do it in the context of like, and I'm not even going to say like you're being blackmailed or some shit. I just mean, would you do it in the context of like every friend you've ever had does it all the time and talks about it so regularly, or like implies it in such a way that like it's just funny, and you've never actually witnessed someone experiencing like what the actual results of it being horrible would be, like someone not having a home. In fact, it's like, to your material experience, literally unthinkable that someone you know actually would like go without food or something. So it's not just in terms of like your personal like desires and connections. It's like you have to think in context of like the formative basis of your ability to intuit and imagine itself. And in that context, would you do this or that? Honestly, it's not a meaningful question. It's too complex for you to imagine. You have to think in terms of just like, if a given system of motivations is designed this way, just what acts abstracted from personalities will result. And then just like imagine maybe you're one of these people, maybe you're not one of these people. It's like not really relevant. Like a given just structure of like there's reward or punishment for certain types of decisions, and like there's a system in place where like acting this way results in this, regardless of like the objective outcome in an external sense to the system. Like you can just predict results in an abstract way in that manner, and it's not going to be one-to-one with reality as it plays out, but it's gonna echo it sufficiently that that's legitimately descriptive. So to back up, I say it's like a twofold thing. Like, this is how to understand how evil people can be, because like without this type of system in place, even if everyone was just like satanically fucked up, like you wouldn't get like Epstein Island shit happening. It's because it's too like rigorously like hidden and organized. Like you have to abandon the sort of Kabbalistic sense of conspiracy where there's like suits in a room planning each move. It's just like a set of incentives in place where people play along and they fall deeper slowly. And there's history to it. Like there was no point at which nothing even remotely like this was happening and then suddenly someone decided like, muhahaha, I am going to make this happen on the side. it's just incentives built up. Like the act that like formed the basis for such conspiratorial evil, to the best of your ability, you could say, is like the fucking founding of the Banking of England in 16 whatever some shit. Like it's just the like a singular like conscious cause of the incentive structure being in place is just going to be like really historically remote. It's like more about the sustenance of a given paradigm of like directives and decisions playing into this chaotic mess of wills. But so that's one thing. You need to think this way to understand like the possible, like the level of evil there can be. But then also you kind of have to think this way to sufficiently look at that reality, how bad it can be, and still, be a good Christian, which is to say, be ultimately capable of forgiving anyone, to be ultimately capable of believing that, like, the sort of core of any given human is good. And, maybe you don't think you're not that, maybe you don't think that matters or is right or whatever, but at least in an approximation, some version of that, honestly, I think is essentially is necessary to like just surviving this world, like as a matter of personal mental health and like the will to go on a little bit, because like to not be guided ultimately by that kind of like wisdom that ultimately people are good regardless of how bad their acts can get. Like it can be very hard to believe that. It can like take work to believe that, and then some people will write that off as like, oh, you're just rationalizing, you're making shit up, like you're pretending they're good when they're not. It's naive. But that's really not it. What it is to see through overriding motivations, and realize that the great evil is generally, it's not like malice. It's not like something that's like essentially evil. It's generally like pride and cowardice. It's a refusal to face some sort of part of reality that would call you to attack differently. And of course there's ignorance, but there's cowardice to sustaining ignorance. But anyway, yeah. So I think I do believe people are good, and I do believe reality is much, much worse than almost anyone has a clue. And both of these are true. And to sustain that, I think it's very important to have this sense of how the way psychopathy actually happens in reality. I would say almost all of the time is according to this. It's according to like some sort of like system that recreates itself out of like agents coming in and going out that must act a certain way in order to sustain the system. Like just the way Marx described capital controlling capitalists, but then taken that sort of abstractly as a form of structure of overdetermining decision making, and just like think a bit more broadly. Think how any kind of social order can function that way, and think in terms of, just as a general rule, think that like given like possible conditions for decisions are defined in essence beforehand by this sort of like structure of incentives and results, and then the design of that is where the abstraction happens, is where the like removal of like an ethically motivated facing of reality occurs. Anyway, that's that. Like, so, you know, obviously I don't have much concrete here, so that's a thought. It's just like kind of just like a term to keep in mind and look around with. One day later, I decided to tag on a thought to that thought. It's something I wanted to explain at some point for fun, but it's like just not enough of its own idea. But then it just hit me later. There's actually a good way of talking about it, so now it's part of this episode. The meaning of the word socialism. What the fuck is socialism and isn't socialism and blah blah blah. Psychopathy as institutional abstraction actually is a good way of putting that which must be overcome. And like socialism, a good way of thinking of what is socialism is just like doing that, overcoming that. That's actually a good way of thinking about it. Because socialism is like a really fucked up word that no one uses well, generally. Because like there's like the sort of the dumb fuck version in the mainstream media of it is just like big old government doing things. That's not right. And then like the generally accepted like fucking leftist version among just fucking college nerds is like just this like just really fucking overly defined version. It's like worker ownership of the means of production. And no, that's actually not right either. That's stupid. That's actually really stupid. It's actually arguably more stupid than the government doing stuff. Because it's an old word. It's not something Marx invented and like made be this exact thing. It's a word that just goes back to people being like, you know, society isn't doing that good. Let's make society do more good. And then like it like drastically spread and popularized with a lot of different kinds of meanings in the time sort of immediately prior to Marx. And it was just this general sort of trend of thinking of just like the French Revolution didn't like succeed, it didn't do enough. Like the framework of rights, which were supposed to create this egalitarian society, are not doing so. So we must have a better society. So socialism just means like making a society that's like made to be good. That's like actually like it's like good to think of the word as vague. That's actually good, because Marx himself wrote about socialism as being like there's a bunch of different kinds of socialisms and socialists, and they all have different kinds. And like literally Marx's way of clarifying how he himself stood out was that I am a scientific socialist, and that's only meaningful when you're like there's lots of different kinds of socialists and I am the scientific one in particular. So it's like there is a scientific method as to how do we achieve socialism. And the method is explicitly like, I'm not going to fucking tell you this is what socialism is and we must do this, because that's idealist nonsense. It's like, how does it work in historical reality that societies change, and how will it work that society would change from what it is now? And then based on that, like, we can like begin to think and talk about like socialism in a scientific sense, in like a grounded in reality sense. Because socialism just fucking means thing after capitalism, basically. That's all it means. That's all it ever has or ever will mean. Which sounds a little retarded, like the inevitability of it that people speak with. It's a truism. It's just like capitalism is a thing, and then the thing that happens after capitalism is socialism. And there's a little bit of like basic theory backing that up. That's like, we're not going to regress to feudalism, but that's just because like capitalism, like the good of it like industrialized society, and it created a society in a new way that like has to go forward from this being the case. So basically, like, society that has gone through industrialization and modernization has come out the other end and become this just anarchy of institutional abstraction, this insane like chaos of institutions acting according to private interests, and institutionally not being grounded in concrete necessity. Just like doing better than that on the basis of that being where we're coming from is just what socialism is. And this is a much better way to think of it than anything else. You should not think of socialism as defined in any way, really. It's like actually really dumb. Because what's common is like what became the norm is just like, it's like the thing the USSR are doing, basically, because it was like the first socialist state, and history was defined by like capitalism versus socialism, there's a Cold War, blah. And then when everyone talked about socialism, what they meant was USSR stuff. And to be clear, that was always wrong and dumb. Like in fucking 1917, 18, it was already wrong and dumb to speak of socialism as meaning USSR stuff. Because the USSR was founded by people who understood it not in that way, but in the actual Marxist way of like, we cannot tell you exactly what it means. Like in the long-term, deep, universal sense. You know, obviously fucking Soviet power plus electrification is pretty clear, is pretty good. But it was always particular. If you're like bringing up the word about like, what do we do in this country? It was never meant to be just do that again, exactly. So anyway, so yeah, I actually think institutional abstraction is essentially that which socialism is like made to overcome. Like, I think that's actually a better way of putting than just even just like capitalism, because like I said, there's a bunch of different kinds, and the unscientific socialisms are still essentially trying to overcome institutional abstraction, because what socialism is about is basically trying to just invoke and view into society and build, like, essentially institutional concreteness. That is the design of material principles that define institutions and how they govern actors according to concrete necessity. So like, the housing system is for building houses, which are for living in. The medical system is for providing medical services. That's like what these things are for. And what they're not for is making money. That is essentially the switch from capitalism to socialism. It's just like, let's just make things that, rather than make money, they do the stuff they should do. That's it. That's all it is. And then scientific socialism is just like basically doing that successfully by actually knowing what the fuck is going on. But actually, I really think thinking about socialism this way is really important, to be like politically aware, to be just literally aware of like geopolitics in general in the world, because like it's not just about like thinking about like how should a socialist state act or something. It's literally just like what the fuck is happening and why in the news anywhere in the world at any time. Because basically we're in the era of socialism right now. And I don't just mean in China, I mean fucking everywhere. Because basically capitalism died in 1929, to be honest. As in, like actual capitalism, like society governed by the profit motive, companies living or dying based on being profitable, like provably in the short term. That's like not how it works now. like in the USA today, that's like not how it works. Like it's just giant monopoly corporations that thrive on fucking taking taxpayer money from the government and like securing like credit and investment and like building their brands in order to be more capable of securing further credit and investment. like they literally are not actually driven by profits now. It's all like brand. Like big companies are like not profitable and continue to succeed and grow. Like profit just is actually not the driving force. So what's going on is like in China, they are scientifically socialist because they have a Marxist authority. And then in America, they're kind of like reactionary socialist. That's actually kind of what's happening. That's like better than saying it's capitalism versus socialism. Certainly better than saying it's fucking market capitalism versus state capitalism. Fucking dumbest thing in the world. Alright, another day passed, so at this point I'm declaring this thought over. That was good enough. I will probably revisit the you are in socialism now thing in a different context, but yes. Institutional abstraction being that which socialism is the overcoming of, and the scientific versus unscientific versions of overcoming it being how to actually think about different ideologies today. And psychopathy is fucking everywhere. And this is how/why. That's all that. I don't even have more to say. I just like felt like I shouldn't end it on random screaming. So there was screaming, but then I was actually basically done there. So